Good morning, guys. It is Tuesday morning, and it's unusual for us to be live on a Tuesday morning, but I had a special guest, and this is how we could fit them in, and I wanted to fit them in. So I'm coming early and coming today. We're also a little bit late because we had some technical difficulties. We are in the middle of a crazy storm here. It's really quiet right now, but if we lose you, we're so sorry. That's what's happened, is that we've got this crazy storm here. We are ASMM Digital Small Business Connections. We're the podcast for entrepreneurs by entrepreneurs. The idea is to bring people on who can offer you something you can use for your business today. And that's what our guest is going to be talking about today. He's going to be talking about a lot of things, but really the mental side of being an entrepreneur and how you're going to move forward. We're on episode 64, which is pretty amazing. And we're streaming live. I remind you every day that we're streaming live. And why I do this is because it gives you the opportunity to ask questions. We're streaming live on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. So if you have a question, if you have a comment, you can ask them. Again, I am also here for entrepreneurs. So if you want to shamelessly plug your business in our comments, do it. If it's something that I can pull up on the screen, I will. But go ahead and shamelessly plug your business. It's a good way to get your business out there in a whole new way. I want you to ask questions. We've got real experts here who can help you. So do ask questions. We'll pull them up. We'll have our guest answer them. If I can answer them, I will. If he can answer them, he will. We're here for you. So let us do that. Our guest today is Sal Schittino. He has spoken. Hi, Sal. How are you?
I'm doing well, Ann. How are you?
I'm good. Sal has spoken at several of our Burgers and Bands events, and we'll have him do that in the future because he's wonderful. He's got a lot to offer, and I'm very, very grateful for you. So I'm so grateful to have you on today.
Thanks for having me, Ann. I'm excited to be here.
So you do two things, and I want to give you a chance to talk about both. You work with adolescents, and then you work with business owners. Can you talk a little bit about how you do both of them?
Sure. So in the therapy office, I work with adolescents and young adults predominantly who are struggling with PTSD, anxiety, and depression. And then when I go to the business sector of things, that's where I do most of my public speaking. So I'll go into offices, I'll go into just places of business and kind of give companies, sales teams, entrepreneurs alike, just different skills, tidbits, and strategies to deal with high stress environments, how to sustain and maintain high levels of motivation, and how to get over those pitfalls that we kind of find ourselves experiencing through our day-to-day, and like being organized and structured so that we can have a clear, open, and hardworking mind so that we're not cluttered all the time.
Well, and this is more important now than ever. And that is a phrase that I keep saying over and over again, more important now than ever. But life is so different for everybody, and for business owners especially, because it's a scary time.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So yesterday I spoke with Drew about a little bit about self-limiting beliefs, but I want to ask you, how do we identify them? Well, first of all, what is it, and how do we identify them for ourselves?
Okay, so a self-limiting belief, it's a belief which is something we deem as truth and reality about ourselves, right? So not always is that truth and reality that we talk about and we have that there's internal dialogue is benefiting us or self-serving. So we want to identify that. And when it comes up the most is when we're going through a change, or we're encountering something that's struggling or is making us question our abilities and competencies. So when they come up, what we want to start doing is being more of a student of when they're presenting themselves. So identifying, okay, this self-talk that I'm kind of twirling with in my head, is it helping or hurting me, right? Is it holding me back from achieving said goal or working towards said task? So it's really anything in the moment that is convincing us that we're not good enough, we're not worthy, right? Anything that's holding us back from being the person we want to be or achieving those goals that we're working towards, right? So anything that's making us feel stagnant, stuck, and complacent.
Can you give me some examples of things that people have said, or people have, they might think that they can go, aha, that's one of those things Sal said is a limiting belief?
Absolutely. So I'm not worthy, I'm not competent, I'm not lovable, right? I'm less than.
Right.
Anything that falls
Right.
under the paradigms, kind of like beating yourself up.
Yeah. And I'm just thinking out loud here, but we talk a lot about imposter syndrome. Almost everybody I know who owns a business, who is heading that business, even if they're, like Michael Hyatt talks about it. He talks about being being the CEO, or being made CEO of I can't remember, big company, publishing company, and that he sat there the first day waiting for the phone to ring and somebody to say, "Oh, no, 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 we made a mistake." Right? So
Mhm.
this is something that people feel all the way up. Is that imposter syndrome part of the self-limiting beliefs?
Absolutely. So when the self beliefs go undisciplined, they turn into the imposter syndrome. Basically, you telling yourself that you are not you're not talented enough, you're not uh, experienced enough to be in a said position. Maybe that's a promotion, or business owner, something like along those lines. That's why it's crucial and it's paramount for us to be disciplined in our self talk. So knowing when those beliefs are coming up and presenting themselves, and acknowledging them in the moment, and then reframing and changing them, right? Really, what we want to do is we want to examine them, right? We want to identify them, and then we want to replace them with new, empowering, uh, basically non-limiting, right? Something that makes us feel as if we have an open mind about ourselves, but changing it in those moments when we're most vulnerable, so that we do not carry it along with us, through our careers, our life, relationships, and so forth.
Right. So one of the things that Michael Hyatt had said, so I will mention why I mentioned Michael Hyatt over and over again. We talk about limiting beliefs, and part of it is that I did a conference with him, and this was an exercise, and I thought, I don't have any limiting beliefs. And then the more I talked, the more I went, oh, I have a really big one that for the longest time would make me cry to tell people about it, which was people don't like me. People don't like me because I am out there and I just spill everything. And and that was hard. I was like, gosh, when I thought, man, I think this about myself. What a horrible thing to think, right?
Mhm.
And then he said, but what about creating a liberating truth? So reframing what you said, right? And so I came up with people like me because I put it all out there, which sounds the same, right? Except that I realized when I put it all out there, it allows them to say, oh, I feel that way too.
Mhm.
Right. And so that having that conversation with yourself and figuring those things out with yourself it's such a powerful thing. So it's been so liberating for me because I honestly haven't had that thought in a really long time. And maybe people don't like me, but I'm gonna, go with the fact that they do.
Well, I'm glad you bring that up, because it sounds like you're touching with that genuine, authentic form of yourself, right? From what I know of Anne, and how you present yourself, that is something that is very powerful for you. It's very you. It's very authentic. It's very much of your essence. And when you tell yourself, like, people don't like me for that, right? We're hurting, and we're kind of stagnating ourselves, and when we feel stagnant, that's when we become depressed. We have depressed episodes because the body feels depressed when it's not moving, when it's not growing, when it's not expelling and moving towards something. So the fact that you challenged that and said, this is who I am, and I'm going to like this is who I am, and I'm going to reframe it in my mind so that it still is, so that it can become something more empowering, as opposed to something disempowering and disenchanting for ourselves. So good. Yeah.
Right.
Well,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah, it's been very powerful. So, all right. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about coping and growing from reflection. So paying attention to yourself and coping and growing. Can you talk a little bit about what you mean by this?
Absolutely. So we all experience times of disillusion or disempowerment or stagnation. In those times when things feel overwhelming and we don't know what the answer is, we don't know where to turn, that's where we want to take a step back. And we want to look at the the different steps that have led us to said position present day, and that's where we want to identify it in basically in a way that we objectify ourselves from our feelings and the situation, so that we can look at it as a whole, right? In 2005, Steve Jobs did a commencement speech at Stanford University, and he said two things that were most powerful in allowing him to grow to such insane lengths in his company and his vision was one, being curious, and two, listening to his intuition. So what he meant by being curious was that he opened up his mind to other solutions and possibilities. So when we take a step back and we reflect upon what has led us to present day, we're able to look at what worked and what didn't. And we take out that personal connection. Because when you have that personal attachment to something, then we start to tell ourselves that it's us who's the problem, as opposed to just the situation or the behavior that was the issue that we want to change. Right? It's easier to change a behavior than it is to change a personality construct. Because a lot of times it wasn't us who is the problem, who is the, this huge issue. It's just a matter of changing our behavior. So it allows us to take a step back, change the behaviors, disengage from our emotional distress so that we don't become the emotion, and think logically and rationally about what we can do moving forward.
Yeah, this is a good subject for right now in particular. If you think about someone who owns a store, especially retail right now, because retail is really struggling. So you think about somebody who owns a store and they're struggling through, and if they can take that step back and go, okay, so what is really happening here? How much of this is me? How much of it is COVID? How much of it is, my marketing or whatever, and have a bigger picture of it? Is that basically, what we're talking about here is taking that step back to look at all of the factors.
Exactly. Yeah, and I think you said it perfectly. Right now is definitely a time where we want to do that step back, because it's really hard to not be emotional when your business isn't doing well, right? And the finances aren't where you want them to be, or you're experiencing an extreme decline. That's hard, and I'm not going to sugarcoat that. It stinks. It sucks. But the way in which we can empower ourselves in those moments and create a platform of still moving forward and growing and becoming resilient of it is by assessing it, examining what's happening, especially up here. Because up here is that's our truth, that's our reality, right? We paint the window to the world outside of us. So we got to make sure things are kosher up there by taking these step backs, by taking these breaks, and really examining the situation for as it is and not worse than.
Right. Well, I mean, we're using this word cope here, and it just occurred to me that, almost everybody I know is surviving this. Almost everybody's company is surviving it. But I say almost because we had a client who had to shut their doors, and I've honestly been worried. I've been really worried about them. So what do you do when it's like, okay, so everything went against us. There's nothing I could do, between COVID and finances and all these other things. So many things went against us. So now we've closed our doors. Now what do we do? How do we cope with something that's that big? Because there has to be mourning there, right? That's a major loss.
Of course. And when we go through big life changes, in a moment's notice, three things pop up, and it's the security of self and others. It's what responsibility do we have, and then what's our control. So when we're assessing those three things, you want to make sure, okay, my person, my employees, that we are physically safe and secure. We can check that box, and then we look at responsibility. Okay, what do I need to take responsibility for as an individual, as a business owner, as an employee? What can I do, right? Getting on unemployment, getting the stimulus package, focusing on things such as that. And then what's within our control? What can we actually do in the moment that we have power over? Because right now, it's very easy to feel powerless. We're up against a threat that is constantly changing and evolving. The COVID-19, we still don't have a whole lot of information to give us concrete data and information about it, so we don't exactly know how to navigate through it just yet. I mean, it's still all over the place. So it's really focusing on what can we take responsibility for as the individual and as the business owner, as the employee. What's our security? Do we still have a roof over our head? Do we still have food? Focusing on those things. And then lastly, what can we actually control? What can we tangibly do in these moments?
Right. Well, and maybe I'm stepping over the line here, but I think this is probably when it is good to have help and not try to do this part of it alone.
Absolutely, absolutely. We all need support in these times. No one
Right.
planned for this. No one was expecting this. And when things are fall under that paradigm of unexpected experience, it's terrifying, and it causes our alarm system to go off, and it creates fear, creates panic, uncertainty, all those things. And without the help
Right.
of others, whether if you need a professional or not, without kind of taking the step back and getting other people's advice, and kind of just having someone to talk to about it, it's going to be hard, because then you're just walking around with all of this stress. What I've noticed is a lot of people think that they can take on the weight of the world on their shoulders because they fit
Right.
under the definition of societal strength. And that is it's just such a wild misconception that we're all walking around with, that strength is the looking as if everything's okay, as opposed to everything
Right.
being okay, right? You're just destructing inside, but you're presenting as if it's fine on the outside. So being honest
Right.
and open with yourself as to what you are actually dealing with. And that when you're honest and open, you can start to see everything for as it is, and not fall
Right.
into that pitfall of it's worse than, it's catastrophizing, and I have no control, and it's just terrible. So that's where
Right.
we can disengage from that by reaching out for help for others, and that's true strength. When you allow yourself to be vulnerable and open to other people's help, that's the strength that we want to communicate to our younger population, and just everyone on a global scale,
Right.
because that's how we get the real and genuine help, I think.
Yeah, I tell people all the time, the bravest thing I ever did was to ask for help. When we were going through everything with our child, with Ethan, and he was really struggling, and it was just a horrible 3 years of depression for him. And when I asked for help, that was the hardest thing I have ever done in my life, but it was the best thing I ever did. So I don't know if you know this, Sal, I do a presentation called Check on Your Strong Friends. And the subtitle is You Might Be Your Strong Friend, right? Because so many people who are the strong friends don't know to look at themselves and say, whoa, 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 whoa. If this were somebody else, I'd be helping them right now.
Absolutely.
So, yeah,
And
so that's important.
that's the majority of my clients, because what I've noticed is that those type of people that deem themselves as this kind of misconception of strength in our society, is what they do is they allow these things to just pile up and pile up and pile up and pile up, and say that I can deal with it behind closed doors, or that other people's problems are more important than ours. So we put ourselves on the back burner. But what
Right.
happens, it piles up to the extent that you start experiencing anxiety attacks, panic attacks, and then things become so overwhelmed that you have to seek out a professional. Whether getting medicated is part of the treatment equation for you, but it doesn't have to get to the point where things are so overwhelming that we feel that the body and the brain feel completely out of control. We can do things beforehand to prevent those situations.
Absolutely. And more you're aware of it, the easier it becomes, right? So when COVID started to hit and my mom was sick, this was just March. My mom was sick, COVID started to hit. A bunch of things happened at one time. And I called my therapist and I said, I know we haven't talked in a while, but I have a feeling that we should. Like, I have a feeling that these things that are coming up are really going to be, life changing for me. So maybe we should talk. So having that person there who you can say, oh, I know we haven't talked in a while, but I need to come in. Right. I need to talk about what I'm going through. It's very helpful. I want to go on into building resilience, because as you were talking, it occurred to me that I often say that we do things that we want our children to do. Right. So asking for help is something I would want my child to do. But our children, we need to, right now, they're building resilience in themselves. And how do we do this? How do we help them? But also we know that they're helping us in this process. We're building resilience together.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. And I think a big part of this is being a student of yourself in terms of your emotions, how your body responds to environmental stimuli, environmental changes, noticing your urges, right? If we allow ourselves to be that student, that kind of professor as to what's going on with us in those times of emotional distress, then what we do is we create this level of awareness that you were referring to earlier, and you become more mindful in those moments. And when you become more
Right.
mindful, you are acquiring way more power and control in those situations over yourself. So you can take that step back. You could take the breath and you could say, okay, look, is it the thought? Is it the cognition that is most distressing in this moment? Is it my body that's overwhelming me, right? And that's trying to convince my mind that I'm stressed? Because when your body stresses out, it communicates to your brain that you feel stressed. And therefore it'll associate with whatever is going on in your environment, which might not be the reality of the situation, right? I might wake up kind of anxious. And then if my mother is the first person I see in the day, my brain will say, oh, okay, mom's making you anxious, so therefore be upset with mom. But that's not the reality. If you create a system of mindfulness, right, looking at, and the acronym that I use, and this is for everyone to take home with you, is TOUGHS. So that's looking at your thoughts, your urges, your feelings, and your sensations, your bodily response. If you are able to look at that more honestly and openly with yourself, then you'll build resilience moving forward, because then you won't be creating this self-deception that it's this person, that person, which relinquishes our responsibility and control in situations, and you're seeing what you can actually do in the moment. So it's really learning from those difficult times, and that's the hardest time to learn. Obviously, I don't want to present as if this is just some easy task that we're going to be professionals at tomorrow, but it's creating a system where you can start implementing it into your day-to-day functioning, like doing those check-ins, just like you would check in and be a supportive ear for anyone in your life most of the time. That's usually what I hear from clients, is like, oh yeah, I'll drop everything and be there for my loved one, my kids, my close friends. But when I ask, do the same for yourself? Oh no, I can't do that.
I don't have time for that.
Exactly. I don't have time for that. Yeah, exactly. Just this barrage of excuses and complaints to do that. So it's really, I want to do that. Go ahead.
It's funny that you said the thing about your body. And I think I shared this yesterday, but I'll share it again. But I was at church the other day and I had on my mask. It's probably the longest time I've had to wear it. And I thought, oh my God, such anxiety. And I don't know what's going on. And what it came down to was I was embarrassing, having a hot flash because the mask was on, and I'm having a hot flash and I'm getting hotter and I'm like, anxiety. And I was like, wait a second. Nope. I'm just.
And you broke up. And can
I hear you? Yep, I gotcha. Look, we both disappeared for a minute there. Okay. I don't know if we did for everybody else on the other end, but on my end, I saw nothing. Yeah, so, okay. All right, tell me about dealing with difficult emotions, because and what are the ones that you think are the most difficult for people in general?
The most difficult ones are shame, guilt, rejection, anger. I would say those are probably the tough ones. And what people don't know about emotions is that it's different than a feeling. An emotion is your first line of defense for your body in detecting what the threat is in the environment that we need to respond to. Right? Well, threats, reward, and anything in between. So it's basically our bodily cue to say what's going on. It's just how our body communicates to our brain, right? So we need to know that an emotion is a bodily response. It's a physiological response to what's happening. And then the feeling is the byproduct. It's after the emotion gets ciphered through the head and creates language and meaning from the emotion, right? Nothing is either good nor bad, but meaning makes it so, which Shakespeare said. So what that means is that it's our interpretation of the event or the situation that's going to create our feeling as the byproduct, and then our basically our kind of reasoning that we have behind it. So a clown can walk past you and I, and for you it makes you laugh, joyful. For me, I'm terrified in the fetal position in the corner, because my past experience says that my belief about the clown is that it's scary because I saw a movie, scary movie, this, that, and the third. Right. But in these moments, what we want to do is we want to challenge the belief, because it's not rational in the moment to be terrified of a clown that is there to present joy and, a good time for me. So that's where we really want to challenge it. But sometimes the emotion is just too high. So we either need to take a break and we want to examine the emotion and what's happening. So it always starts at the physiological platform. So you want to start by calming down the body before you do anything. We don't want to challenge the beliefs while your body is in this disarray and you're releasing all those, chemicals, those stress chemicals that are happening in the moment. So you want to take a step back, do some breathing exercises, deep breathing in through the nose, out through the mouth, right? Progressive muscle relaxation, strenuate the muscles and relax. So things such as that, and then we'll start challenging the beliefs, challenging the thoughts and the interpretation of the situations. But this is big for business owners, right? I was with a CEO of 3 companies the other day, who's a client of mine, and he's saying, I'm starting to build up so much stress about the staff meetings that it's starting to become unproductive, and I don't know what to do about it, and I keep confronting it. I'm like, well, it's good that you're confronting it, but you got to make sure that we know the message that we're sending to the brain in those situations. So if you continue to confront it in these high levels of bodily stress, then you're going to continue to associate that in your brain. So you got to take a step back and have time for a break and to calm down the body. So breathing exercises, or even doing something like push-ups is going to be good. Exercise releases serotonin, which is your mood stabilizer in the brain. So anything that's incorporating that, and then you start examining, challenging, and replacing, reframing those faulty and irrational belief systems that we're walking around with.
Right. We go back to what you said earlier, and we were talking about, I don't have time for this, right? I don't have time for this. The gift you're giving yourself by taking those moments to breathe, taking those moments to meditate, taking those moments to go for a walk before you have a difficult conversation. They're truly a gift you're giving to yourself, but also the gift you're giving to your company. Because if you're leading a company, you have to be level-headed. You can't go into things up here and this kind of stress. You have to be level-headed going in. And those are the best people you see, is the ones who can take that moment.
Absolutely. And there's one more little tidbit about emotions, is that what I've noticed is that a lot of people believe that there are good emotions and that there are bad emotions. We've got to scrap that belief altogether, right? Because we can't control our emotional output in the moment, right? It's just, like I said, body's responding to what's happening in the environment. So we want to do is we want to create a level of acceptance and say, this is a difficult emotion. It's not one that I want to be in. It's tough, but it's happening. So I'm going to accept that it's there, right? If we accept it, then it allows us to name it. Then it allows us to find a way to express the emotion so that we can, lower the onset of it and the frequency and duration of it. And then we throw something that's more empowering in the moment, like a coping skill, some sort of strategy, whether it's talking to a friend, whether that's writing it down, something that we can divert to, and like we've calmed down and we're able to actually open our minds up to using. So that whole little spiel I just said, the takeaway is the difficult and pleasant emotions as opposed to good and bad.
I love that, because anger is, for me, I've always thought of it as, oh, that's a bad emotion. I don't want to do that. Right. But I love the fact that it's difficult. It's a difficult emotion. I don't like to be angry. I don't like what that feels like. So it's hard for me. So that's a really good way of thinking about it. Now I got to go read more about it. So, all right. This was one, decision fatigue, because I was really interested when I asked you for talking points, you give it to me, and I'm like, business owners, we make a lot of decisions. So tell me about decision fatigue.
So decision fatigue, that falls under the paradigm of how do we deal with difficult emotions in the moment as well. Because when your brain is kind of depleted and exhausted of its resources for making a high level decision, or even a small decision, but it gets exhausted. So we want to take a step back and know our warning signs for when we need a break, right? So that's like, okay, all right, I'm overwhelmed. I know that when I get overwhelmed, my thoughts start racing, my heart rate goes up, I start sweating, or I get irritable. Just knowing your warning signs is going to be huge. Also creating a system for you to organize. Now, most people like yourself have that system of, whether it's a planner, whether it's some sort of online application on your phone, but to basically take those thoughts and those to-do lists and put them onto something else so that you can free up your mind of thinking about other things that maybe more important in the moment. And then in the back of your mind, though, that you have whatever decisions, whatever phone calls, whatever meetings on some sort of platform where you can refer to at any moment. That's really important. And I feel like a lot of people forget that because they have too much trust in their memory bank to just pull these things out, right?
Right.
We all have our strengths, we
Right.
all have our weaknesses, but no one has the ability to retain 100% of the information that you regurgitate or that you're learning. Even who is it? Bill Gates. He has a 90% retention rate, which is insane, off the charts, unreal. But still, there's that 10% room for error. That he's got to write these things
Right.
down. He's got to have a secretary or someone that's organizing this stuff. So make sure you're organized, right? Know your warning signs and know how to deal with your difficult emotions in those moments, and knowing when it's time for you to take a step back, identify the emotion, examine it, and then find a coping skill for you.
Right. Well, and you know what? This actually leads to a whole other topic, which is delegating, right? Taking some of the things and realizing you don't have to do it all. And actually, we could talk about this as business owners. We talk about it as parents. We talk about it as students, right? I had to say to Zane over the spring, you got to step back. This is too much to deal with. This is too many things that you're trying to juggle. What can we let go of? What are some of the things you can let go of? And I think that's a huge part of being a business owner, is realizing what you can let go of.
Yes, yes, yes. Well said. I think we attribute too much meaning to very minuscule remedial things. And when you do that to your brain, your brain's saying that this is super important, that's super important, that's super important, and then you get overwhelmed really quickly. So what we want to do in those situations, and I think this is something you alluded to, is instead of looking at building the wall, let's look at each single brick. That's huge. And that's really good for mindfulness, dealing with difficult emotions, is you want to see what you can do one step at a time. Right? Einstein, he said, when I deal with difficult problems, it wasn't looking at the problem as a whole. It was breaking it into its manageable parts. Let's start doing that, right? Instead of saying I need to make X amount of money in 1 year, it's good to have long-term goals, but let's not focus, dwell, and ruminate on those goals. And we want to look at what we can do in our day-to-day. Right. So if you say, if I make 20 calls today, I feel good. I accomplished my goal, as opposed to saying I need to have, 1,000 calls in a month. That's that overwhelming brain. It's too big of a number. So when you're building that wall, just lay each brick as meticulously and perfectly as possible. And that's where our control can focus its attention and be most productive.
That's really great. Actually, as we're going into the next one, which is all about, what are your favorite books? Before we do that, I have to ask you, because I do own a digital marketing agency, do you have a blog? Do you write?
Right now, no. Our website just started our personal blog, or our website's blog, so our private practice blog, about a couple weeks ago, and we did post one thing up. I'm more of a speaker, so I like to get out there and talk. But there's a need.
I think, you know what, you said so many things on this that I'm like, oh, that's a whole article in and of itself. So I think, yes, there's a need. We can talk about that separately, but yeah, I think that there's a need. I think, just that, going back to, you said there's a difference between emotions and feelings, and putting it in a format that people can look at, I think would be helpful for your website. Sorry, I'm totally interrupting our podcast to talk about that, but but it is something that I think you should do. So tell me, what are some of your books you would recommend to people? Books that you really like?
The first one, which I read during the pandemic, is The Untethered Soul. That's a really great book on learning how to disengage from emotions, learn about emotions, and finding different strategies and techniques and ways to better sit with them. Because that's the goal that we're looking for. Once you realize that an emotion isn't as bad as our brain tells it is, right? Like rejection, that's a tough one. It's hard to sit with. It tells us that we're unlovable or something about us is bad or wrong. What you want to do is you want to disengage from the emotion itself, the bodily response and what's happening in your mind, and say, okay, what can I do about it? So it allows you an understanding as to how to navigate those situations, how to meditate on those emotional states, and how to make the most of them, in those situations. So I think that's really good for anyone that's trying to learn how to better cope, manage those difficult emotions. For sure.
That's great. So I'm going to look that one up. So, all right. I want to how do people find you? They can go to this website.
Hmm.
right? Sal's Therapy Corner. Are there other places they can find you online if they wanted to have you come speak to their organization?
Absolutely, absolutely. The best place to book my speaking services is Sal's Therapy Corner, but you can also contact me on Sal's Therapy at Sal's Therapy Corner for Instagram, Sal Schittino on Facebook. I also have our practices website, which is www.cmhahelps.com, spelled all normal. And at the end of all that, if you're not comfortable looking online and whatnot, and you want to have a phone consultation with me, you can just reach me at our private practices number at 410-756-0035, and we can set up a free phone consultation at any time. It's
Okay.
for both of us.
And I'm going to put this out there for all of you. When people call me, especially if they call me for their children, Sal is always the one. He knows us. He's the one that I refer to most often. I trust him. I trust him with my kids. So he's just a wonderful guy. I want to talk tomorrow. We have Stephen Crisp coming in, and I'm excited. He's a voice teacher, but he's going to talk about creating an evangelist for your business, because you can't just have a business out there and run it yourself and do the marketing yourself and put it out there. If you create evangelists who go out there, like I just did, actually, right? I just said, Sal's the guy. That's who you want to talk to. I did this morning. I put it out there and said, oh my gosh, it's raining. If you've got leaks in your roof, call Quality Remodeling. If you've got leaks in your chimney, call Chimney Tech. I'm an evangelist for several brands out there, right? It's important. So we're going to have him tomorrow talking about that. I want to remind you to subscribe. You can subscribe on YouTube, and that would make me happy, because again, my kids think I'm a nerd because I'm not at 1,000 followers yet. I really need 1,000 subscribers over there, so help me out. But you can also subscribe where you're listening to podcasts. I'd appreciate that as well. That helps our small business here. And speaking of our small business, for asmmdigital.com, we do digital marketing for small businesses. Basically, we become you online. It's what we do. And it's how we started this podcast. Kind of tells you that we go a step beyond. I started this podcast with the idea of bringing my clients in front of my followers on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and YouTube. I wanted to give them something extra, and this was the extra, and just grew to be something bigger than itself. So, Sal, thank you so much for coming on. This was really, really great. I really appreciate it.
And thank you so much for having me, and thank you for everything that you do. Being a small
Well,
business
thank you.
owner, and then also being a community outreach coordinator and having burgers and bands. You do so much, and you're so impressive. And I think everyone that we have you in our world to be such a shining example as to what we should do every day. So thank you.
Thank you, Sal. I really appreciate that. And actually, maybe we should do a burgers and bands event, on here, and talk about what we do there. So, all right, guys, I will see you tomorrow. We got Stephen Crisp tomorrow, and we've got 2 more episodes next week. See you soon. Bye-bye.